Hello, everyone. Pastor BM here on the marriage of my youth. I believe you are well by the grace of God, and thank you for being here today. God bless you. Today, we want to consider a very important subject and a very sensitive one as well. It is very important because it is top of the list in terms of divorce in the world. It is right at the top. So it is very important, but yet and still it is very sensitive. So we want to look into the area of sex quickly, but we want to look at it from this view: sexual compatibility. We see that sexual compatibility has become a thing, a very big one for that matter. And when people speak of sexual compatibility, are they really speaking of compatibility or sexual comparison? Are they really communicating sexual compatibility or are they communicating sexual comparison? Are they comparing their partner instead? So we want to look into that quickly, and it will be a blessing in Jesus' name. Now, I want to read out the definition of compatibility and comparison quickly, and it will be something that we will take with us even on this journey for you to come to a proper understanding of what we are doing here. So, compatibility is a state in which two things are able to exist or occur together without problems or conflict. So, compatibility is a state in which two things are able to exist or occur together without problems or conflict. And comparison, on the other hand, is a consideration or an estimate of the similarity or dissimilarities between two things or people. Comparison is the consideration or an estimate of the similarities or dissimilarities between two things or people. But I want to ask this question, and I hope that you meditate on it even as we go along. In kingdom marriage, in a marriage that is considered kingdom marriage, do we have sexual compatibility? Do we do sexual compatibility in kingdom marriage? Now, while you meditate on that, I want to go quickly to the beginning, and that is Genesis, to look at the purpose or the purposes of sex quickly before we get into the heart of compatibility and comparison. So, if we go back in the beginning to examine the purpose or the purposes of sex, we will consider that marriage was instituted to suit sex. So God came to the place where he created marriage in order for sex to find expression. Now, in the book of Genesis 1:28, we saw that God blessed them, Adam and Eve, and he said that be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply, indicative of the fact that a man and a woman will come together in sexual intercourse in order to fulfill that which God has spoken. Before even coming to Adam and Eve, he made this pronouncement in Genesis 1 22 to the fish and the birds. So he blessed them and he told them to be fruitful and multiply. So before even men, coming into this reality of being fruitful and multiply, he spoke that over the birds of the air and the sea and the sea creatures. So it is indicative of the fact that two will have to come together, a male and a female, in sexual intercourse to arrive at the place where we see the fruit of that act of sexual intercourse. And that is the first purpose of marriage, reproduction, sex, rather. That is the first purpose of sex, reproduction. Now, when God made that statement, Eve was still in Adam, and even Adam was not physically out yet. So we now see in Genesis chapter 2, God came to the place where he brought Adam forth, and he also brought Eve out of Adam and instituted marriage and put them together in order for them to fulfill what was spoken in Genesis chapter 1, that you should be fruitful and you should multiply. So it was designed, marriage was designed to now suit sex, because being fruitful and multiplying, you will need two to come together in order to do that humanly. So God then created the institution of marriage so that word or that decree or statement can be fulfilled in marriage. Now, in Genesis chapter 2, the verse 24, we see that the Bible speaks of the two becoming one. The two becoming one. And that is the second purpose of sex in marriage. The two becoming one. It is a design where God allowed these two people come together and become one flesh. So the two becomes one flesh. That is the second purpose of sex in marriage. And for God, that is the actual journey. That is when the marriage is consummated. He consummates the marriage when the two comes together and become one flesh. That happens through or by sexual intercourse. And now we see pleasure follow. So it is also designed, sex is also designed for us to come to the place where we have pleasure. So we cannot take that out of that. Now, God, God had to bring about the institution of marriage in order to suit sex for this reproduction to begin to take place in marriage. That is very key, because when a man and a woman come together and become one flesh through sexual intercourse, the man is now going into the woman, and he is not just going in her for pleasure, but he is going in her to fulfill what was spoken in the beginning: reproduction, fruitful, multiply. So he goes into the woman and he releases a seed in her. Very important. He released a seed in the woman, and that seed will come out after 9 months, and it won't only come out as a godly offspring, but it comes out as the image and likeness of God. That is very important. So, sex was designed to come to the place where it begin to multiply more gods like on the earth. People that will come to the place where through their reproduction, they create more of the God kind. So, sex was or is more than just an act or pleasure. So it is a divine plan to showcase and express more of the image and likeness of God. This is how powerful sex is. This is how important sex is. And this is why God designed sex to be done in marriage, because it is something that through it we will create more of the God kind. So he have to come to the place where he put us in a covenant that is holy and ordained by him, in order for us to express and showcase more of God on this earth. That's how important and that's how powerful sex is. So, reproduction, becoming one, and pleasure, it is very, very key for sex. Now, if you look at two people that have been married for a very long time, you will see that they look alike. What that the reason for that is that they have been engaged in sexual intercourse for a very long time. So what that does is that it begins to transform them from inside, that it begins to show on their outside. So you will see two people that have been married for a very long time, and you see that they look alike. It is through sexual intercourse that they come to that place where they start looking alike, because sex has a transforming power that happens from inside that shows on the outside. So it's very, very key. So sex in marriage is very significant to God. And if we consider Jesus, for example, you see, when Jesus came into this world, he was just walking with his disciples at the time when he first came. And at the end of everything that he wanted to do on this earth, he came into the disciples. It was only then that people started calling them Christ like. So they became alike to Christ. So they started looking like Christ. They started acting like Christ. So intercourse happened. So Christ, after walking this earth, had to come in his disciples. And it was only then, when men look at them, they saw that these people are Christ like. They look like Christ. So I said that to say that in marriage, the purpose of sex is to bring us to the place where we look like God, where we come to the place first, we look like each other, and from there, we begin to reflect God, even on our physical appearance. So, beyond the character and characteristics and attributes of God that we carry, the nature of God that we carry, we begin to express God even on our physical appearance. So it was very key when Jesus went into his disciples. It was very key because he needed them to be like him. And when he went into them, what happened is that he deposited seed into them. And what that does is that they will have to produce fruit according to the kind of Christ. So the seed that Christ deposited into his disciples, when they were bearing fruit, the fruit that they were bearing, it will have to be the Christ-like fruit. So this is why sex is very, very powerful and is very, very important. So Jesus, after everything, came into his disciple, deposit a seed in the same way the man will deposit a seed in his wife. Christ deposited some seed into his disciples, and when they begin to walk, they begin to bear fruit of Christ. the Christ kind of food or fruits. That's what they were bearing. Now, we are one with him. Remember, he's the husband of the church, us. So Christ is the bridegroom. He's the husband of the church. So he is in us to be just like him and one with him. Christ is in us to be just like him and one with him. This is how powerful sex is in that light. So the two becoming one flesh is for the man and the woman come together in sexual intercourse where they become one and they begin to reflect God even through sexual intercourse. And that is why they have to stay in the confines of marriage. They have to stay in the institution that God ordained. You see, as I said earlier, for God, sex is really what that joined both of you to consummate the marriage by becoming one flesh. Let me read something quickly in First Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16. First Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16, the Bible says that, or do you not know that he who is joined to a harlot is one body with her? For the two, he says, shall become one flesh. For the two, he says, shall become one flesh. Now, in order for you to be joined with a harlot in this sense, is for you to sleep with her, is for you to come in contact with her sexually. Now, in that same way, God is saying that he's even referring us back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. The two becoming one flesh. So that is how powerful sex is to bring the man and the woman back into each other, and then they begin to reflect God is again. So Eve was in Adam. God had to come to the place where he took Eve out of Adam. But then he said the two will become one again. So in order for them to come back into each other, it will have to happen through sexual intercourse. That's where they come back. But this time, the man will be the one that is going in the wife. And that is where oneness, the bone of unity, the bone of oneness is created. And nothing can shake that. So sex plays a very vital role in that, both spiritually and physically. So sex is very important for men and for God. It brings you to the place where you go back into alignment with yourself and you begin to reflect God. And not only that, you begin to produce fruit or bear fruit that is according to the God kind. So that's how important sex is. And you see, the devil knows this, and that is why he's using words like sexual compatibility to begin to destroy the mind of people. You see, that word in of itself is not a bad word, but because of the wrong use of it, sometimes we see it as a bad word. So let me not go ahead of myself. I will touch on that in a little bit. So now, sex is so important and so powerful that God had to allow Moses to use sex as a ground for divorce. Meanwhile, in Matthew chapter 19, verse 8, the Bible says, it was not so in the beginning. And Matthew chapter 19, verse 6 says that what God has joined, let no man separate. You see, God allowed Moses, a man, to separate a marriage, which was not so in the beginning. God did not create marriage for or separation, for divorce. Otherwise, that whole oneness, that becoming one flesh, wouldn't have been something that we can look up to, and we can look at to really come to oneness with God even. So he did not create marriage to come to the place where it is separated, not even by men, but sex is so vital and so important that God had to now go back a little bit and say, okay, even though it was not so from the beginning, but infidelity, I will consider you to allow it to be a ground for divorce. Then you see how powerful that is. Something that God Himself has said that what God have joined together, let not men separate. Is coming to the place where He said, okay, in terms of sex, in terms of infidelity, it is okay. It is a ground for you to divorce your wife, for you to be separated with your wife. That's how powerful, that's how crucial sex is. And this is why we want to look into it quickly, and most especially looking at those two words, compatibility or comparison. And I hope you are stay meditating on my question. In kingdom marriage, in this kingdom, do we really do sexual compatibility? Do we really have sexual compatibility in kingdom marriage? So the enemy is taking advantage of this because he knows the power of sex. He knows how powerful sex is. So God, in his wisdom, came to the place where he said, no sex before marriage. It was for a reason, a very good one as well. And that's where the sexual compatibility and comparison also play a role. So God, in his wisdom, knowing the importance and how powerful sex is, he said, no sex before marriage. You see, most of the things that we are calling compatibility, if we were able to keep ourselves before marriage, if we were able to abstain from sex before marriage, we wouldn't be facing those kind of issues today. So God knew exactly what He was saying. And men will have to come to the place where they begin to go back to the commandments of God in order for us to live in harmony, peacefully, and enjoying what God has ordained for us to enjoy. So, sex, marriage was created to suit sex, to bring us to the place where beyond reproduction, beyond becoming one, we have pleasure with each other. And that brings us to the place where we begin to produce the God kind from that pleasure. So when God was saying no sex before marriage, it was a very, very important call to everyone in this kingdom and everyone in this world. But today we have neglected that, and this is why we are facing the problem of compatibility, because we have neglected a very important commandment or a very important instruction from God: no sex before marriage. I want to stop here quickly, and in the part two, I will begin to open up and show you the difference between compatibility and comparison, and what people are really saying. What do they really mean when they say sexual compatibility? And we'll begin to see it in the Bible, and even going back to the question that I asked you, then you will begin to understand that sex, there is no compatibility in this kingdom. And I will show you in the part two. God bless you for staying, and I pray that you come back to look into the part two, and it will be a blessing for you. Bye for now. Thank you.